Okay, we've finally managed to download the first episode of The Watchmen, a series on HBO. The first episode, It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice, was directed by Nicole Castle, written by Damon Lindelof, and originally aired in October. Sorry we didn't find the wormhole sooner, or we would have seen it sooner. So, Doss, what do you think of this first episode?
What do you think of this episode?
Well, I thought it was pretty good, although it's not anything I would have expected.
So, by pretty good, you mean amazing?
It was...
Amazeballs good?
I thought it was pretty darn good.
Amazing?
I could see that you liked it even more than I did.
What you were going for? I agree, it was amazing. That was a good observation, indeed.
Well, if I had imagined for myself the direction that the Watchmen universe would have taken after the comics or after the movie, I think this follows from the comics more than the movie. I probably wouldn't have imagined exactly this. So everything in here was a surprising new direction. However, I'm not upset with the direction they chose. It's just not what I would have imagined.
I never read the comics.
You never read the comics?
No.
I'm sorry. You folks at home can't see this, but I'm doing my shocked face. It's classic literature.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
So the Watchmen's up there with like Little Women and Tolstoy and Mark Twain for classic literature.
It's better than some of that because it features major corporations exerting control over the world, just like really happened.
I will say that I did watch the movie, and I thought the movie was pretty good. I enjoyed it when it came out. So, like you, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect in the TV show that they were going to do it with. I knew that the TV show was going to take place after the movie had happened. So, all those events, this was going to be much later that happened. So, I wasn't really sure how they were going to do this. And I was surprised that the main focus seems to be on race relations. That seems to be the topic, the big idea that they're going to, I'm assuming, continue on with throughout the entire season. But I wasn't upset by that. I thought they did a really good job. I've loved everything that they did, and I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, while it wasn't what I expected, it wasn't bad. It was still very good. And I guess we should start our recap at the beginning, which, even though the story takes place far after the events of the comic book, the beginning actually starts well before the events of the comic book, in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we see a little boy who's watching the silent movie of Sheriff Bass Reeves, an African-American sheriff cleaning up the wild frontier. And the sheriff proudly declares that he's not going to see a man lynched today. He's going to trust in the law, which becomes the perfect opener for what follows, which is people lynching a bunch of folks and not trusting in the law. Do you know anything about the events that this series references?
Well, I will say that in school and that I was never taught this particular incident that happened in history. There were others that I knew about, like Rosewood and that, but I had never heard of the Tulsa incident at all. So I did look it up in the historical records, and after I learned about it, I was kind of wondering, why don't we learn about these things in school? I thought that was interesting that we kind of seem to ignore some of these periods of time where we don't really teach the correct history, but it was true. It really did happen in 1921. And I know that at the time you were amazed to see airplanes were used, and they really were used.
So that's not just something they invented for the episode. Because when they leave this theater, as you hear explosions, you see a biplane swooping around And that's a thing that happened?
It's really a thing that happened. So I guess what had happened in the 1921, there had been a 19-year-old black kid that was entering this elevator, and there was a teenage girl who was an elevator operator. Some incident happened between them, and through that, this whole entire kind of mob mentality started happening, and the whites just started going through and killing a whole bunch of black citizens, and it got really out of control.
So this entire massacre happened because some black dude in an elevator bumped into some white elevator operator?
Yes, and from what I can tell, it literally is like bumping in. They call it kind of an assault, but there really doesn't seem to be any evidence or any kind of interviews of that anything like that happened. The theory is that he tripped, and when he went to kind of steady himself, reached out and touched her, and then she screamed because she wasn't expecting it, and then because she screamed, he freaked out and ran away, and then from that came this entire they call it a riot mob, but it definitely needed to be called a massacre, because that's exactly what it was just a massacring of a whole bunch of black citizens.
Jesus. Well, so the episode doesn't tell you why this is happening, but now that I hear why it's happening, it's even worse. Some dude bumped into some chick and everybody went up in arms. Okay, so in the episode, you can see that the mother, as she's playing the music for the film, because back then the silent movies were accompanied by some kind of musician playing the music.
Yes.
And she clearly seems disturbed even as she's playing the music. The kid doesn't seem to know what's going on. He's just enjoying the show. But soon enough, there's an explosion, and that draws them outside. It looks like the child's father comes in and says, "We gotta go." And then they flee out into the street where you see mayhem and massacre and people being accosted.
The biplane coming in and shooting up a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, the biplane seemed to be dropping explosives in. So I imagine the explosion that shook the theater must have been the biplane.
It was crazy.
But the father comes in, he's got a weapon, and he's in kind of a uniform, I think.
Yes, he's in an army, it looks like, uniform.
So that implies that he's served in the army at one time, probably during the Great War of 1914, which we also had in our universe. And they evacuate to a mechanic shop. Seems to be a mechanic they know. He's clearly tried to convince this mechanic to take his family, but the guy says they don't have enough room, so he says, "Great, just take the kid." And he writes a note down on a piece of paper, which already has something written on it. And he slips it into the kid's pocket. The truck starts driving out of town with the poor kid stuffed into a trunk. Bullet holes start appearing in the trunk. He peeks out through the bullet holes, which, by the way, I was thinking, don't do that, kid.
Yeah, I was like, there's nothing there you're going to want to see.
But that's when we see the final scene of the biplane swooping down and dropping what looks like a lit stick of dynamite or something. It doesn't look like a proper grenade, but like some kind of improvised explosive.
Yeah, I'm sure for the time, whatever it was appropriate.
And then it just blows up, and then we skip forward a short period of time to that truck being overturned, the kids waking up from being unconscious. They're outside of the town, so they made it out of that immediate scene, but something unspecified happened outside of the town that resulted in everybody on that truck being killed, except for the kid at first. He gets up, he's bleeding a little, he's looking around to see what happened, and then he hears a crying infant as he also finds the note in his pocket. And when he looks at the note, it says something like, "Take care of this boy.
Watch over the
Watch
boy.
over the boy. Watchmen, watch over." So, and then he goes and he picks up the baby, and he looks behind him, and you see the whole town is on fire. And that's the opening sequence. And I gotta say, what an opening sequence. That could have been in a film. a high budget film in the theaters, and I would have thought they spent millions and millions on this.
They probably actually did spend millions and millions on this. I wonder what the production cost was for this particular series. But I have to say, HBO recently really has put in a lot of money into their shows. They really are not cutting corners on production. Everything down to the period type details in when it came back into the past and then goes into the future. They do a really tremendous job with it. So hats off to them. They did not spare any money, that is for sure, on this particular episode. And I'm guessing the entire series is like that.
Yeah, there's nothing that looks cheap or underfunded. There's nothing that I can point to and say, television production values. No, it doesn't look like any corners were cut. And I love the sepia tone they put on the flashback scenes. As though it wasn't clear enough already, but to give you the feel that you're looking at something that occurred in the distant past, which goes nicely with the silent movie he was watching at the beginning, too.
Yeah, I have to say the particular writer and director of this episode, and I'm guessing hopefully going forward is going to be the same way. The attention to detail is really kind of amazing, and it's really also interesting how well thought out everything is. There's so much different ideas that you can see have been woven through everything from start to finish. So when the little boy is sitting there in the theater and he's watching this particular silent movie, the interesting thing is that the criminal, the culprit that Bass Reeves has found is actually the white sheriff of the area. So it was the law that was supposedly taking advantage and doing the criminal enterprise to the people of the area, and it's Bass Reeves who's the African American marshal that comes in to right the wrongs. So it's kind of interesting how that subtle little detail that they put in there you might miss, but I feel like it was really intentional, that there's so much of those little intentional things that they put along the way that you have to really be watching closely to understand what they're trying to say. There's so much, I feel like, metaphor and everything throughout this entire episode that it's really amazing how much really thoughtfulness, in my opinion, went into it.
Do you think that foreshadows maybe the arc of the season? Like, are we going to find out there's a corrupt sheriff that's causing all the problems?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see as it goes on, because I feel like everything is so intentional for a reason. You might not know what that reason is yet, but I feel like the writer and the director really are doing that type of stuff for that particular reason. We might not know it, so it'll be interesting once we've seen everything, just how much those little, I guess they call them Easter eggs, turn out to be. Really, are they Easter eggs? Were we right, or maybe I'm wrong? But I feel like some of this stuff is so intentional, it has to be.
Well, our next scene clearly takes us into the future of the Watchmen universe. We're no longer looking at the past, as we see a hillbilly.
Back to the future.
Yeah. We see a hillbilly type guy driving an electric pickup truck, and we could tell it's an electric pickup truck because it has that little electrical charge display that we have now started to become accustomed to, but which traditionally wouldn't have existed in this universe in the past. And even now, finding an electric pickup truck would be weird. But this electric pickup truck has a charge meter. It gets pulled over by a police officer, and at first it's not clear what's unusual about this, but very shortly we see that this guy, who maybe had slipped some alcohol into his soda because he looked real nervous about his soda, as he's getting interrogated, the first thing that happens is the police officer asks, "Is it okay if I record you?" The guy says, "Sure." Then the police officer starts stating things for the record. So far, that's not too unusual, but, we've just started using widespread police cameras. The cop asks about what he's drinking, whatever, normal questions. Then we see the officer after the guy asks, "Can I look in the back of your truck?" And then the guy says, "Well, can I look at your face?" And that's when we first become aware of the fact that the police officer is wearing a yellow mask that covers his features. And that's when we get the idea that certain things have definitely changed in the Watchmen universe from the time of the comic book or the time of the film.
Well, and you can kind of notice because you're already tipped off that something's unusual about this already, because the person, the driver, we don't know his name or anything like that, but he puts his hands immediately on the steering wheel. He's already nervous. So you already get the idea that there's something a little bit unusual about stops and traffic things and everything else, because that's not usually the normal for someone to do, in my opinion, that kind of situation.
Well, I do know in real life a lot of traffic stops resulted in unfortunate events. And so I can imagine myself, even in the normal timeline, putting my hands in clear view when an officer pulls me over.
So I would say yes, if you're of a minority subset, that's normal to do. But I would say probably as a white person, it's not your normal standard operating to like be freaked out and to immediately put your hands on the steering wheel and not to move and not to, be very nervous. Like, I don't think that's probably the typical reaction when you're getting pulled over. I could be wrong, but that's never been my first instinct when I've been pulled over. So I felt like that told me already there was something a little bit unusual about whatever's about to happen. But yes, the whole I'm wearing a mask, you can't see the police officer's face, that's a little odd. I wasn't expecting that, I'll say. So it's interesting to see how things have transpired to this point.
Yeah.
Because they don't really, it's just your first hint that things are a little bit different, and you don't know why yet because nothing's explained.
Right. That's one thing. They don't go out of their way to explain things directly to the audience. Mm-hmm. They let you pick up things by observing how people act in this universe, and therefore how things must have come to pass.
It's those little details that they expect you to really look at and to make sure you're paying attention, because you could miss something that they're giving a little bit of nod to that you might not realize they're doing. So
the very next part of the scene when he returns to the car reveals the next unusual thing about police officers in this setting. His gun is locked in the car and he has to radio in for permission to unlock it because he feels that this is potentially a dangerous situation. He eventually says he saw a Rorschach mask in the guy's glove compartment. I did see a cloth. I wasn't sure what it was, but they make a point of showing him move it aside. Apparently, some group of people are wearing Rorschach masks, and I guess anyone inspired by Rorschach, who was quite a ruthless defender of what he believed to be justice.
Yes, and I guess you could probably say also very anti-establishment. There's always a conspiracy going on, and he's trying to root out what that type of conspiracy is, and paranoid type of the characters, at least from the movies. Again, sorry, have not watched the greatest literature of the comics. But in the movie, that's definitely what he is. He's very the anti-establishment, everything's a conspiracy, paranoia, everyone's out to get you, and all with this, aliens and other stuff that's happening, right? Like, he's always got this.
And even when he was investigating normal crimes, he was quite extreme in his measures that he would take.
Yes.
He didn't withhold himself the way others might who saw themselves as, beacons of hope or anything. He was just doing the job. Mm-hmm. Now, I can see why a police officer might be nervous about anyone who had a Rorschach mask, given this history to the character. We don't know yet, although soon the episode reveals, it's not just one guy who's inspired by Rorschach who has a Rorschach mask.
Yeah.
But he has to call in for permission to have his gun unlocked. And there's some red tape, which I really appreciate, because it really reflects our culture in the future of this alternate universe to them. Everything is red tape. And it's nice to see them starting down this path in this fantasy world.
Yeah, that worked out really well, the red tape for him.
Yeah, they clearly need to streamline their procedures. But as he's radioing in, and the guy on the other end is going down a checklist of things that you have to say before they can unlock the weapon, there's a sense of tension developing. Like, he needs this weapon. He doesn't have it yet. He needs it. Oh, they tried to unlock it. It didn't work.
That was also what I thought was interesting, is that they have this technology in place where you have to seek, I guess, permission before you can get your weapon. It's presumably locked and you won't be able to use it. I'm trying to figure out what had happened. Like, that's what I'm most curious about, because something had to happen with the police and someone else that they don't trust the police to be able to have their weapons readily available to them anytime they want without getting a lot of procedures and permission. So there had to be something that happened, and I'm curious what that was. Again, they don't tell you. But that the fact that the technology isn't really the best, because it took about 4 or 5 times of trying to unlock it before it actually worked.
Yeah, I have the feeling that some of the police equipment is in a state of disrepair, which actually tracks with a lot of the corporate security forces I've seen, that their equipment, it's not a priority item for the corporations, and maybe keeping up police equipment isn't a priority item for the municipality he works in. I'm not sure. But finally he gets his weapon unlocked just in time to see the guy. He has stepped out of the pickup truck. He has some kind of better firearm, and he shoots the ever-living heck out of this officer.
Yeah, his firearm wasn't locked, it seemed. He didn't need special permission to get use of it. So.
And then he throws a cabbage in the car.
Lettuce.
Lettuce. Oh,
yeah,
lettuce.
It was lettuce.
So I thought, that's interesting. I guess he really was hauling lettuce in addition to whatever it was he was worried about. There was at least some lettuce there.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of curious why he was pulled over, because they don't make that apparent when he's making the initial traffic stop. He didn't say, like, oh, do you know why I pulled you over? You were speeding, or you have a taillight out, or something, how they normally tell you in the normal traffic stop routine that you see. The police at least tell you initially what it was that had triggered that. And usually when they're calling in, they, read off the license plate and the driver's license of the person to them to see if it comes up with any priors or any warrants or anything like that. But like, none of that happened. So you're still not even sure what the initial stop was about. What was it about this particular truck and his driving or whatever that had made the police officer want to pull him over? I still don't know.
It's possible that even though they're clearly setting up this Rorschach guy as a bad guy, because he just shoots a police officer, but maybe the police themselves aren't all that hunky-dory either. Maybe they are just pulling people over for no reason and looking for excuses to mess with them.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but obviously something had to happen with the police and the citizens, because they don't readily have available their weapons that you would normally think they should.
Yeah, it's a lot like, I think in England during this period, a lot of the police officers didn't carry firearms. And so it's sort of like that, except they all seem to have firearms, they just can't always get to them. But another thing that I found interesting is this hillbilly type figure, or this southern white guy, was listening to like urban hip hop or rap music, I'm not sure exactly, in his car. And in the very next scene, we see an all-black production of Oklahoma, which inverts the expectations of
everything that, like I said, it's all about the details with this. They really try and put those subtle things in. And again, it's all about the race relations, right? Because the police officer who pulls him over is black. The person who is the hillbilly is the white. So they're always at this opposing opposite ends that we see so far between the relations of black and white.
Yep. Now, in this next scene, we are introduced to someone that it will soon become clear is like a police chief of the town. He's watching this production of Oklahoma, which looked nice to me, but we later find out in the episode that he said something about it that was uncomplimentary. But this session of him seeing this show is interrupted when they come to tell him about this police officer being shot. I thought we were going to find out the guy had been killed, but apparently, despite being shot a whole bunch of times, he survived. I can only imagine he was wearing a police vest. But the guy who comes to tell him about this is wearing a yellow mask, just like the officer.
Well,
who
he's
pulled
also
it.
in uniform too, so
Yeah.
all the police seem to be.
Except this guy. This guy, he shows up at the hospital. He says, "Did they bring my uniform?" Yes. We eventually will see him in uniform, but he's the only one that doesn't wear a mask. And I have to imagine that maybe the head of the police department, because they're in something of a public relations role, maybe they're the only member of the police who doesn't wear a mask. His detective, who meets him at the scene, has a really cool reflective mask. We don't know who he is yet exactly, but he's clearly a higher ranking fellow than the ordinary police officers. And I was like, oh, maybe they issue a different kind of mask to the detectives. But soon we'll find out. Every detective or every higher ranking member of the police force has a distinctive mask that I guess they get to design themselves, or they get to pick.
Yeah, I'm not sure. None of that's really explained well, but I feel like they're picking their own kind of persona. They're picking themselves and making it their own costume. I don't really want to say like a costume like a superhero, but it's kind of what they have.
Yeah, it's like
taken on as like they've made their own kind of superhero outfit persona.
It's a merging of the costume vigilante of the Watchmen era and the police department. The police have adopted the costume vigilante persona, which is interesting. I guess they decided to own it themselves so that the ordinary vigilantes couldn't have it anymore. But he meets with the guy's wife. He explains what happened. She seems to have already written off her husband. At one point, she says something like, "He really liked you." And the sheriff or the chief is like, "He likes me." You know, he's not dead yet.
Yeah, but they also don't show that he is in a state that might ever come out of, too. So it's
I mean,
really
I was
left
surprised he was alive at all, to be honest.
yeah, but you're kind of never really sure how that future is going to hold for him either.
Yeah. Now, when he meets with the wife, he says things like, did he ever talk about his job? Did he ever tell anyone he was police? This is really a big secret thing. There's a lot of talk about secret police in certain countries, but apparently in the United States, in this fantasy future, the police are literally secret.
Yeah, your neighbors don't know you're the police officer, and I guess if you have masks, nobody's really going to be able to know. Again, I feel like something's happened that we're not really being told about yet. It's all kind of like a foreshadow of what's going to come through. But yeah, I mean, the wife was like, no, he told people that he was in night school for, gosh, I can't remember, like engineering or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he was like, okay, we're going to say he was in a car accident, hit and run or something like that. So it was interesting how you weren't even supposed to tell like family, friends, neighbors, like nobody's supposed to know what you actually do for a living, and that you do kind of make up, again, these secret lives, or I mean, not like witness protection so much, but almost like witness protection, where you have a whole setup of job that you're like the fake ID type thing that you were set up in society because you can't tell anyone that you are actually in law enforcement.
Very secret agency. And I can only imagine that at some point in history, I was already formulating this theory, someone killed some police officers because they were able to identify them, and they've taken some precautions to avoid that.
It does get a little bit foreshadowed in this particular episode of what happened, but they don't tell you necessarily, but yes.
Well, in our next scene, we begin with someone, we don't know who exactly yet. They are teaching some students in a class how to cook. I think it's a baking class. And it starts with a demonstration of the eggs.
Separating the eggs, the yolk from the whites.
Yes, and I remember you were telling me when we were watching it that you thought that this could be a metaphor for the series as well.
Correct, because she's talking about how you don't want the yolks and the whites to be together, and the best way to do that is you need to segregate them. And so I thought it was interesting how the particular dialogue and the words that were chosen, I felt were chosen specifically again for those little Easter egg details that they're trying to weave throughout this entire episode of kind of what's going to be foreshadowing and what's going to be coming and what kind of story they're going to be telling in this season.
I really appreciated some of the visuals they're doing. Like they show the bowl with the eggs in it from underneath with the yolks, and it looks like a happy face, just like the comedian's happy face button. And even one of the egg yolks has a little spot of like blood in it, like maybe a chicken was starting to grow in there. And that spot of blood is in precisely the place that the spot of blood dripped onto the comedian's badge in the comic and the film. So nice little homage. I don't know if you also noticed, but in the scene transition between the wife being told about her husband in the hospital and this one, they pan the camera over to a television, which is showing a report of something going on Mars. And we see a tiny little image of Dr. Manhattan, a little blue man, collapsing some structure he's built on Mars. So it looks like the government is still monitoring the activities of Dr. Manhattan on Mars, maybe with a satellite or something. So that was interesting to show that that's still going on. In the back room of that classroom, we see a lot of interesting posters and displays. One of them shows the anatomy of the squid, which in the comic books, instead of Dr. Manhattan blowing up a bunch of cities, it was a giant psychic alien squid appeared and destroyed New York, I think. And this was a plot by Ozymandias. Instead of faking Dr. Manhattan nuking cities, he created a fake giant squid with psychic powers that nuked New York and died. So it looks like they're going off the comic books on this one. If they're showing the anatomy of the squid and they have an interest in the squid, it's either a subtle reference to the comic book or it's like a major concern.
It's a major concern, and we see that going on. So I thought it was interesting that, again, because you said they went back to the comics a little bit, but then there are little homages that they make to the movie as well. So I think so far they're doing a good job between blending things that happened in the comic books as well as what they established happened in the movie in this particular series. They're kind of taking little tidbits from each and are kind of incorporating little nods to them throughout, which I enjoy.
Yeah. I also noticed in one of the scenes in the background, they have a poster of the presidents. And I remember, I don't know if it was in the comics or the movie or both, it might have been both, that Robert Redford was running for the presidency. And in this poster in the back, you can see that one of the presidents featured is Robert Redford, along with Nixon. Now, the instructor turns out not to be the teacher of the classroom, but a guest speaker. And she explains that she used to be a police officer in Vietnam, which is now the 51st state, because we won the war thanks to Dr. Manhattan. So she explains that she was a police officer in Vietnam and then immigrated to the United States and stopped being a police officer in a rather gruesome story that finally confirms something happened where police officers may have been targeted, because she mentions that someone broke into her home and shot her, and that's when she retired. And I wondered, I wondered how far-reaching was this event? Did it just happen to her, or did it happen to many police officers?
No, she said it happened to many police officers. She said that's when police officers were targeted, and she was one that had gotten shot that night, and she just survived, and then after that she retired.
Well, and apparently...
And now she's got a bakery.
Right, and the minute she says she has a bakery, one of the kids asks, "Did you buy that bakery with your red Fordations?" Which sounds to me like Robert Redford must have initiated some kind of payment program to oppressed minorities. And this program has been nicknamed Red Fordations, and maybe some people are sensitive about it. I can kind of understand why you wouldn't want your tax money to be going to pay people for something that happened before you were born. So I see how that would develop some kind of animosity.
But then on the flip side, then you have a whole group of people that have had terrible atrocities happen that nobody wants to acknowledge at all. And so then that also breeds a lot of resentment too, because then you're kind of glossing over history and a lot of the issues that are arising to problems that are today because nobody wants to deal with.
Right. The question then becomes, yes, you didn't do anything to me, but because of things that were done to me or my family in the past, I am now suffering today. I'm in a different place than I would be. And they're like, well, you can't punish me for something I didn't do. And I can see how this would become a very sensitive topic in society. Her son, I'm not entirely sure who her husband is at this point, but the son might be adopted. It doesn't look like her. And he punches out this kid who mentioned the red fordation. So it's a very sensitive topic in society. She ends up having to take him home. And on the way home, it starts raining squids.
Well, it doesn't start. So there is a warning. There's a warning that goes off, a siren. Then all of the cars pull over to the side, regardless of where they're at. They can be on the freeway. They're all pulling over. They all stop driving. Then all of a sudden, squid pour down. They wait for it to stop. They get out. The squeegee the cars off of these dead squid. And then they just move on. And it is the most bizarre thing I have seen in a while. And the most bizarre thing is they act like it's just an everyday occurrence.
Right.
As if like, yeah, this happens. This is our life now. This is where we live.
There's even a street sweeping vehicle that comes down the street.
Yeah, squid just rained down. And we have a warning system in place. And we clean it up after. Like this is not normal. This can't be normal. Why does everyone act like this is okay and normal? Why does nobody at all think this is strange?
Right. I guess it's been happening for a long time. For
Well,
all we
they have a
know.
warning system. It has to be, because I don't know what warns them it's going to happen. I don't know what in the atmosphere tells them squid time, but something almost like when you have bad weather, like tornadoes or hurricanes or whatever it is, right?
Their meteorologists are clearly better than ours. So, they clean it up. They move on with their life.
Okay.
When she gets home, her husband and her daughter are
Cleaning
spraying.
off the sidewalks.
Yeah.
'Cause nobody wants the squids out there.
So then she gets a page, and it looks like she's getting ready to go somewhere. And this is where we get the idea that maybe she's not actually retired from the police. Because she goes, first of all, what baker gets a page and then marches over somewhere with a sense of purpose like that? And this march with a sense of purpose is very interesting. So she gets to a place near her bakery. Mm-hmm. We see what looks like maybe some kind of protester holding a sign of the Statue of Liberty upside down. And the sign says, "The future is bright." And I'm like, what is the message here?
I don't know, but I love the subtle messages throughout everything. You get to see the graffiti and the different pictures and all of this in this particular neighborhood that her bakery's at. And it's strange that her bakery's not open yet.
Well,
so I don't.
So
that was my other thing. I was like, how long has this white whatever night taken place? It must have been semi-recent, because she said in the classroom, like, I retired and opened a bakery, but the bakery she goes to shows that it's still like under construction, opening soon. So I don't know if maybe that's a new location.
Well, here's my thing.
It's hard to know.
That bakery is never going to open. That's my theory. It's perpetually gonna open, and it perpetually
Well, if that
never
is
will.
her secret persona, then yes, but you would think it would need to be open at some point.
Well, so
she just take
on this
like,
march.
oh, we're gonna move over here and say we're gonna be opening soon. Oh, now I gotta move somewhere else because I can't, like, for 2 years have it saying opening soon.
I guess eventually they'll have to actually open the front
I would
business.
think so,
but
right?
As she's marching over, there's still more interesting things to see, because after we see that activist,
I don't know,
with
it's
the
hard to
sign of the upside down Statue of Liberty, we see a guy's reading a newspaper. And there's also a dirigible overhead that's advertising time's running out. The new show is going to start soon. And we don't know much about this yet, but she's walking down and there's a guy reading a newspaper. We're going to see more of this guy soon. But the newspaper was very interesting to me, and I actually stopped the video feed to read the newspaper.
You have to, because everything is there for a reason, I swear.
It's true. They have clearly planted many, many seeds, and they want you to be able to watch this a second or third time and catch new stuff, because there's just too much stuff.
It's too much details that goes by pretty quickly. You would have to, like, watch it a couple of times or be so studious when you watch it that it takes you 4 hours to watch the 45-minute episode, because there's no way you're going to be able to catch all of the little nods that they're doing.
In fact, I think this review and recap is going to be longer than the episode because there's so much stuff to talk about. So in this newspaper, it tells two stories that I found very interesting. Well, maybe three. It says that Veidt has been declared dead, which was Ozymandias from the comic book and the film, which was interesting. It also says that due to vandalism at the Statue of Liberty, the site has been closed, and the vandalism was done by the KKK. So this let me know this is clearly a predominantly black town. You see many, many black people as she's walking down the streets, and not as many white people. It lets me know that...
Well, it could be that this is the particular also...
It could be the neighborhood.
It could be.
But
we don't know yet.
It lets me know that the racial tensions aren't confined to this town in Tulsa. They are happening at the Statue of Liberty, too. And it's the KKK at the Statue of Liberty. We are soon going to find out there is an entirely different white supremacist organization happening here in this town. And I found that interesting. It indicates there are problems throughout the United States and not just in this region. Mm-hmm. So she walks, and this guy who's reading the newspaper turns out to be an old man in a wheelchair. And he asks something like, "Oh, so when is that bakery going to open?" As though he knows there's something odd about this bakery. And she says it'll be open in a couple months. And he's like, "Okay, sure." Like, maybe he doesn't believe her, I'm not sure. And then he asks her the most bizarre question.
It was so out of the box. Out of all the things I thought he was going to ask, do you think that I can carry 200 pounds, lift 200 pounds?
Right.
Was not exactly what I thought he was going to say or ask or
I was like,
make mention of. Like,
what does that have to do with anything? And why would you ask such a question, right? Little old man in a wheelchair?
And even she was like, "You're crazy, sir." Sure, whatever. And then just like walks away because she's like, "I don't have time for your crazy maybe Alzheimer's, dementia riddled whatever's going on," right? Because it's weird. Like, and then I thought, are you trying to apply for a job? Or you're like asking how heavy do you think those bags of flour are for this particular bakery? I don't know. It was weird.
So she goes into the bakery after having this bizarre encounter with the old man. And she goes into a secret door, and
there's always secret doors, right?
Well, when you have secret police, you need secret doors. So she starts getting decked out, and there's some Catholic memorabilia. And we will soon find out, as she takes on her police persona, that not only is she a police person, she's repeatedly referred to as being like a nun. Now, I guess I don't know what nuns look like, because at no point did she look like a nun to me. But everyone refers to her as looking like a nun, and I think her name ends up being Sister Night or Night Sister.
Yes.
So I guess her costume is meant to look like a nun. She just looks like some badass black-clad...
She has the habit of a nun. The hood in that is like a nun's habit. And then she carries the rosary beads and that. So I can see where it is like that. I just... So it's kind of strange because you're not really introduced to a lot of the, I don't want to call them superheroes, but you can't really call them Watchmen because they're really not Watchmen.
Well, I guess they are in the old sense of the word, the Night Watchmen.
Yeah, but like in here, they're really considered like police, law enforcement, right? So you're introduced to a couple of these kind of characters, costumed, special people, but they give you no hint at all as to why they have this particular costume or outfit or why they've chosen what they've chosen. Like the very first one that just had the shiny mask, you're not really told why does he have the shiny mask or why he like what is it about that. You're not really sure why she decided to look like a nun or take on that, or why some of the other ones are. And that I find fascinating, because I'm hoping that I get a little backstory to figure out why they are the way they are, because she doesn't particularly seem very Catholic to me. I mean, she could be. I'm not saying that she isn't, but there's nothing that I would say that if I had to, like, for how I've been introduced to her, if I would have decided, like, oh, she's going to pick a persona, I don't think I would have picked a nun. It would probably be pretty far down the list of people. Now, I do realize that probably Julia Childs isn't going to be as intimidating as a persona, probably, as you're a law enforcement person.
Well, clearly,
with your pearls and
clearly they don't care about that, because we're going to find out there's one of them named Panda who has a giant panda head on his head. Clearly he's more clerical, but still, not exactly the most intimidating figure you could.
But I don't think he's meant to be either. Like, I get why they put him as the panda, because it's kind of like a joke, and they make the character as a joke. Like, he's the joke character, so it totally makes sense why that fits. But it's just interesting how they pick some of these. I'm sure the nun and Catholic and that religion, and that they're saying a whole lot in that particular.
I'm sure they are, but here's where I think they failed a little bit for me. The Soviet guy, or the Russian guy, is called Red. He's got a red mask. Very clear. The panda guy is called Panda. He's got a panda mask. Very clear. This I did not realize was a nun outfit until they told us, because they've made the nun paraphernalia look so cool. Like, it didn't look like a habit to me. It looked like a cloaked figure.
Oh, no. When I saw that, I totally thought of nun. So I think it's just that you don't know much about religion and
that's possibly true.
Catholicism.
That's possibly true.
I feel like that's probably what
I hear
is.
HBO is doing some Pope stuff, so maybe I should watch that. And
yeah.
But anyway,
definitely.
Whether or not she looks like a nun, she does look awesome.
All of them kind of do, even when they're.
Well, the panda guy doesn't look awesome, but that's intentional.
Exactly.
So
but there's like so much I want to know. I want to sit down and interview and be like, why did you pick this? Why?
Some of them are obvious. Red, being a Russian guy, super obvious. Panda.
It's the accent that gave it away, right?
Yeah. They totally make it clear right away that he is Russian.
That was a joke.
Oh, so she goes to a trailer park with a big Nixon statue in the front, which we will later learn is called Nixonville. She goes there, she breaks down a door, she kidnaps someone, puts them in her trunk, and drives to the police station, which is totally not kosher police behavior in the normal era.
Well, is it or isn't it? Because so far, it could be totally.
Well, in this future of the Watchmen universe, it clearly is, but in the actual timelines, both our timeline and these people's timeline, where the HBO is coming from, this is not normal police behavior. At least not police behavior that would be approved of on any level.
Well, I think it's a nod to, especially if you go back to secret police, where in a lot of countries, the secret police, people disappeared in their homes to never be seen again. They would be there one day, and in the morning they just wouldn't be there. So it makes sense. I can kind of see what they're doing.
I can see it happening in an imaginary dystopian future, but this is another indication that police work here.
Today too, but you just don't want to acknowledge.
Corporate police get authorization to do all these things.
Sure.
Anyway,
of course they do.
It's another indication that the police are different in this.
So
future.
Here's my theory. She went to that particular trailer pretty quickly. She knew exactly where she was going. She knew exactly who it was that she was targeting, and in and out. It wasn't like she had to do any research or ask any people.
It's like she had inside information of some kind.
Yeah, so here's my theory on that.
Okay.
I feel like she knew where to go because of the kid in the classroom.
Oh, you think it's like maybe a relative or a father of that kid?
Because he was pretty, the Redfordations and everything, she was like, excuse me, knew exactly what he was trying to infer, right?
Right.
And it's they don't make any qualms to say this kid is a racist in the classroom, right? Like, this white kid's clearly a racist.
Right.
And so she knows who that kid is, which of course she does because her kid got into a fist fight with him. So obviously you're going to know that kid's name. I feel like it's either a relative of that kid or something, but I feel like she knew where to go because that was a hint that this particular house or home or family might be racist.
Yeah, she said the kid's not racist, but he's well on his way, and maybe she was implying that the family was going to turn him that way. So you might be right. She might have been like, you know what, that kid's parents
or relatives or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, she knows
they're
exactly.
probably in with this group.
So if you're trying to find out some information and you want to like question someone and you're not sure who's a racist and who isn't, you know, these are kind of where you get probably some of your information from, right? To target, because they don't ever explicitly say why. They don't ever explicitly say how she knew. I will say that there was a little bit of, the only thing I didn't like was the cheesy line about bleach.
That's coming up soon, and yeah,
but
that was my least favorite line in an episode full of great lines.
Oh, such an amazing episode, and I felt like, it was a cheap shot in my opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like they needed to make. But yeah, so I felt like they never explained how she kind of got information that she did. But I felt like that was like a little that's just my idea, my little like, I feel like everything is like tied together. And so I feel like without...
Even though it's not explicitly shown, that's a good theory about how she knew which home to target in this trailer park. Which, by the way, it's a trailer park full of what I presume to be poor white people.
Well, the writers and the directors, I think, aren't making any qualms about stereotypes. They are definitely putting a nod to a lot of stereotypes in this episode and probably throughout the series as well, right? So, of course, if you're going to look for racist and you're going to look for white, you're going to go to the trailer park where, you know, the poor white cracker, like all of those type of kind of what you would consider tropes or stereotypes or stereotypical type of thing, and they embrace it.
You say, of course, about the stereotypes, but I like that they show, these are impoverished white people. Who's going to get mad about tax dollars going to black people? It'll be poor white people who are like, hey, I'm poor, I need help too. You know, you can be poor without a history of oppression or whatever. It adds some nuance and texture to the two sides in this world. It's very easy to show a whole neighborhood of super rich people drinking the champagne and going, oh, we don't want reparations to go to those horrible black people. But when you show that it's a bunch of poor white people saying this, you're like, well, I can understand you don't want them to get the money when you need the money too. So I actually think it adds a little nuance and texture to the universe. And while these guys are clearly bad guys, it's important to be able to understand why the bad guys are doing what they're doing, and you can. So I like that this isn't a whole suite of upper class homes of white people who are rich and working at corporations. I like that this is a racist group of poor white people who might be racist because they're poor, and they see money going to other people, and they're like, why don't we get any of this money? So I like that. I do not like that she, like the secret police, kidnaps him and takes him to the police station, but we soon find out why they may feel this way. Because when she gets to the police station, they are watching a terrorist propaganda video that probably was released after the death of the officer, or the shooting of the officer.
It seems to be, yeah.
And they're like, we won't be finished until all the black filth is cleared out of this. I'm like, jeez, man.
They're in a church, which is always interesting too. Again,
and they're all wearing their Rorschach masks, so it's an organization. It's not just one dude in a pickup truck.
Yep. They call themselves the 7th Cavalry.
They're using, the 7th Cavalry, which now, with that newspaper article from before, we now know there's more than one white supremacist organization that's having an impact on this world. And in fact, this may be worse than the KKK, because the KKK apparently did vandalism that shut down the
Well, I feel like they're kind of all one and the same, but we haven't, like, there isn't anything yet, but we'll see.
I hope they're not all one and the same, because there is totally room for a whole bunch of similar organizations to exist that aren't the same organization. And that's scarier. It's scarier to know that you can't just take this one out and be done with it. There's like 15 other independent organizations all doing the same thing. So I like if they're separate. I like that there's one over there and one over here.
But they all have, work for the same.
Let's not say anything bad about franchises, first of all. And let me also say, I would like it better if there isn't a single backer to all of these organizations, because that implies something that isn't true. It implies that you need some ultimate mastermind coordinating all the white supremacists in the nation, and you don't. Little enclaves can form with their own little motivations, and they may work towards the same ends, but destroying one doesn't mean you destroy them all. So anyway, this video is it's pretty severe. They're using a lot of the rhetoric from Rorschach's journal in the comic book or the movie, but
which I thought was interesting too.
Well, they're misapplying it.
Well, I think it's interesting that they're showing some of the groups that have embraced the particular character and ideas of Rorschach.
Well, so here's my thing. This isn't what they're espousing, isn't what Rorschach was working towards. So to me, even though Rorschach was probably racist and probably classist and hated liberals and all of that stuff, Rorschach never went on a crusade against a race of people. He was always against particular injustices or flaws of character. He was not against, let's get all the black people.
No, but
to me, this is an example of how a religious text can be applied in different ways by different groups of zealots. Because while Rorschach was not interested in wiping out a race of people, someone could take his writings, make inferences and connections that he never intended, and use it to an even more extreme position.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think it's interesting to see the groups that have decided to put on his particular mask and that type of stuff, especially when he was such a conspiracy theorist type of character.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see what exactly the 7th Cavalry so far is embracing too, because we really don't know yet.
It's a lot of the same sentiments he wrote in his journal, but applied in a very different way than he would have applied them.
I also really liked the metaphor of the clock.
Oh yes, tick tock tick, which carries through the episode in various ways.
The entire episode, and I like that because that was the big thing. And again, maybe probably in the comic books as well, but the very big thing in the movie was the clock.
Yes.
And so the ticking of the countdown and all of that. So it's interesting how they've kind of taken time and the clock and all of that and used it in this series to a really great impact. Just the little sounds of the tick-tock of the clock that you'll hear in different parts of the episode, and that it's just really brilliant how they've taken that kind of imagery and have kind of woven it throughout the entire episode, and I'm guessing series as well.
I'm curious, is it going to be just a theme for this episode that we constantly see clocks and tick-tock sounds, or is it going to run through the whole series?
I think it's going to run through the whole series, especially since this particular, you want to call them the bad guys. We don't know yet, but so far this seems to be the arch-villain that we're fighting against, right? The 7th Cavalry, this racist group, whatever this is, that is, because it seems to be these people that are targeting police officers and blacks and all of, they don't like minorities and this type of stuff. And they've embraced that idea that time is of the essence. They've got something going on. Something's going to happen. You're not going to be able to stop it. Just wait and see. So I feel like because that seems to be the group that they are embroiled with right now, that it's going to be an ongoing theme because that particular group has embraced it.
So after that chilling video from the Rorschach 7th Cavalry terrorists, which now, after seeing it, I can kind of sympathize with some of the extreme measures the police are taking.
Mm-hmm.
I won't endorse those measures, But I understand where they're coming from. So then...
By extreme measures, you mean the fact that they're now going to all get access to their weapons?
No. By the fact that they're violating the rights of ordinary citizens.
Kidnapped someone?
Yeah, I mean... what she did should see her in jail for the rest of her life.
I mean, you say kidnapped. She just wanted to talk and have a conversation and just went to a more comfortable setting for everyone where they could all be more comfortable.
So the things she did are so criminal and such a great violation of the individual citizen's rights, especially when conducted by a government authority, and these people didn't sign waivers, I'm sure, unlike corporate police, which lawfully sometimes invade a person's home because waivers have been signed at the point of employment. Unlike that, this tyrannical government agency has violated the individual citizen's rights, presumably without them signing such a waiver.
Well, I believe when they did have a conversation and asked questions of this individual, they said that they didn't have to.
Yeah, so I'm getting there. I'm not there yet, but so far...
it seems like you are incorrect.
No.
They do have the ability to question and to invite these people to have a conversation.
They may have that ability, but it doesn't make it right. This is a terrible
you are asking if they had the right, like the actual lawful...
I mean the ethical right.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, I will not forgive the extreme criminal acts of the police department, but now I can put them in context. There is this terrible group out there, and it's an existential threat. I mean, these people want to wipe out an entire race of people. So that's pretty severe. So now the severity of the police agents, the secret police, seems a little more reasonable in that context. I'm not going to authorize it. I'm not going to say I endorse it, but I understand it. So after...
Does that make you a panda?
I probably would be the panda in this situation. I like his corporate mindset, checking all the boxes.
You just like pandas.
I do like pandas.
Okay.
So anyway, they vote after watching this video to unlock everyone's weapons. It's interesting that the group can hold a vote within itself to authorize itself to have more power.
I think it would be interesting just to kind of get a lay of the laws.
It seems like this is a reference to the old line that the Watchmen is a reference to. Who watches the Watchmen? Mm-hmm. Apparently, they watch themselves. They're self-regulating.
Well, that's what pandas want.
So they can just elect themselves whatever powers they want, as long as they have the majority, which is a terrible system.
It did seem that they were like, oh, in order to do this, you need to have certain votes, and you need to have this much. So they did do everything that supposedly they needed to do in order to do that type of thing.
It's a ridiculous system where a group of people can vote themselves more power at will.
Well, it had to meet certain criteria, it sounded like, and it met that particular criteria.
Yeah. Do most of you want more power? Yeah? Okay, we have more power. No, that's a terrible
but
system.
It seemed to be like not everyone was going to vote yes unless there was an extreme situation, because otherwise they would have done that a while ago, and the poor guy when he was pulling the person over wouldn't have needed to have unlocked his weapon. So maybe they... also, because they had great power, understood the great responsibility that came with it. You don't know.
Yeah, if there's ever a continuation of this series, I totally want to see a police department that just elects itself more power because they can. Because I feel that's what would happen. But anyway, they elect to unlock everyone's weapons to deal with this existential threat. Then she reveals to her boss that she's already got a guy in her trunk. We're all ready to be interrogated. And he's slightly bothered by this, but not as much as you might presume. They're clearly old friends, and he's willing to give her some latitude. So they take this guy.
And that's where he did ask, so how did you know this person? Or, how did you know that they were part of it? Or... kind of asked that question.
That's where the bad
line came into play. So I was like, he did actually ask. He was a little surprised that she knew a 7th Cavalry person or knew someone who was potentially had ties to this group and hadn't let anyone know. So he did, even though he did give her latitude, did still question, as you would hope, like, well, okay, you have a person in your trunk, but then how did you know that that would be even a...
So in a good world, and not a dystopia as this presents, what you would expect is, oh, you kidnapped a man and put him in his trunk before we had authorization, you're fired and in jail. I mean, that's what should happen. But what actually happens, and he goes, oh, well, how'd you know? And then she delivers her horrible bleach line. You know, I knew he was a white supremacist because I smelled bleach or something like that. It's a terrible, terrible line. And then she brings it up again later, and she's like, see, bleach. But let's skip over that, because in an episode full of good dialogue.
Yeah, I'll give them latitude. Everything was so well done, and you always have to have that kind of over the top sometimes moment where you want someone to say something that you feel is like kind of profound, and maybe it doesn't come off quite as profound as you wanted it to, and that's okay. Yeah. I understand it. Sometimes your people have to kind of be boastful, and
they're trying to give her a cool line. They picked the wrong one. I can move on from that.
Yeah. But
so they put him in the pod.
I was going to say, I was interested about this because they kind of hint about, like, put him in the pod. And you're like, what's the pod, right? And you're like, what is this? And then it is a pod, like, literally a pod. Because at first I wasn't sure what they were talking about, but I was like, oh, I wonder what that means. It's got to be a metaphor for something. No, it literally is a pod. But I thought it was interesting where we finally get to see more about the
mirror guy?
The mirror
face
silver
guy.
Whatever you want to say mask that he wears, because he doesn't have any other outfit like other people do. It's just the particular mask that he has taken is just a silver mask, and that's it. He doesn't wear anything else as a costume other than that, so you're really not sure what his deal is.
So let me tell you, his deal is there's a great scene in the pod. They bring on the lights, and the reflection of the lights and his mirror mask makes him look exactly like Rorschach. Exactly like Rorschach. And I wonder, there's a couple of possibilities. Possibility one, he has this mirror which is meant to reflect the nature of those around him. He's interrogating this white supremacist who's suspected of affiliation with the 7th Cavalry Rorschach.
Well, they're not
people.
sure what he is yet.
They're
suspect him to be a white supremacist that might know more about this organization, right? So they need to question him to figure out, is he really? What's he hiding?
Right. So they suspect him of being affiliated with this group. And we also see that the mirror mask guy now displays what looks like a Rorschach in his mirror mask. Mm-hmm. And to me, is he reflecting the nature of the man across from him? Is it a metaphor? Or are they suggesting that he himself is either like the original Rorschach, or does he have some sympathy towards these people? I don't know. But I do feel like it's more than just, oh, look at this cute Easter egg of an image. I think they're saying something deeper, and we don't know what it is yet.
I also found it really interesting because I wasn't sure what was supposed to happen in the pod, right? When you normally talk about police questioning or interrogation, you normally think like, oh, he's just going to beat the ever-living crap out of the person and they're going to get their answers. You're not really sure what's happening or what's supposed to happen in the pod. But it's kind of interesting. He does ask just a series of questions, but as he asks them, he has a whole bunch of different pictures that flash and different lights, and I was like, man, I hope nobody's epileptic, because they're gonna have issues with this thing. They're gonna have a seizure and fall over.
So here's what I thought. Have you ever seen an old, late 20th, early 21st century show called Lie to Me?
Yes.
Okay. I think they have it in this universe too. But it's about a guy who could tell whether you're telling the truth or not by watching little micro expressions on your face while he's asking you questions. And I felt like this was very similar. The reaction to his questions combined with the guy's reaction to the images that were displayed were supposed to tell this guy what kinds of things he might be hiding or lying about.
I thought that was kind of clever how they did it. And apparently they've done this for a while because they have a whole pod built for this guy. Like, it is a sophisticated outfit. It's not something that was just hodgepodge put together 5 minutes ago. This is a system that they've had for quite a while, it looks like.
Yeah, and he talks about eye dilations and little things. Now, it's him. It's the mirror guy doing the interrogation and everyone else waiting. And again, maybe this is about reflecting the nature of other people. He might have the special training that allows him to get this done.
Yeah, I wanted to say it was really almost more scary than getting beat up, in my opinion.
Well, no, because in the very next scene, after he says, yeah, I think this guy knows something, but he's not going to talk without extra motivation.
Well, he just said that he definitely knows something, and he did his part, and then someone else had to question as well. They all have different questioning techniques. His takes place in a pod, that's all.
She takes him to another room.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It looks like she's going to let him go.
I'm sure she's taking him to... I guess nuns don't do confessionals, right? That's the priest.
Normally, but in this case, she does the confessional, and apparently the... whatever you have to do to make yourself right with God is what she does too, because she takes him to another room, looks like she's going to let him go, shoves him in there, beats the ever-living crap.
Does she? We do not know that.
There's blood that comes from under the door.
It could be just water. We don't know.
It's
none
blood.
None of it is. You can't make those type of leaps. You should know better.
Remind me to put you through another psychological evaluation before continuing your
I've
contract.
I've gone through all of them. I'm ahead of that. My synergy is top notch.
All right, Das. So after her gentle interrogation in the other room,
questioning, yeah,
she knows that they're at a ranch, or a cattle ranch, I think it was.
I think it's a cattle ranch is what she said.
So the next scene, boom, the police are arriving at the cattle ranch for the coolest action set piece of the episode.
Again, they spared no cost for production value. They really did a good job.
Yeah, and in this sequence, we will soon see how hamburger is made. Because they are approaching this ranch house. Was it also a mobile home, or was it a proper house?
It looked like it was a mobile home that was on some land with cattle.
So they're going through this field, through some cattle, to reach this house. And the minute I saw the cattle there, I was like, is there going to be a stampede? Is something going to go wrong with the cattle? It wasn't what I imagined.
No, but I did feel like they were there for a reason. And they were. And it wasn't just to make hamburger.
Well, inside the home, some operatives from this 7th Cavalry were collecting watch batteries in a bag.
Again, another
watch reference.
To time, right?
And I'm like, what is the deal with these watch batteries? What do they need? Are they going to put them in a bomb or something? But why do they need so many of them?
They did say after this scene was done, they do talk about a little bit of what they suspect. But yeah, it was a weird... Like, I guess when you're going to the enemy's secret hideout, you expect to find, like, drugs or a bunch of weapons, maybe some... explosives. That's usually what you suspect. You don't like batteries from a watch. Like, you don't... Yeah. That's not normally what...
it was a strange choice.
It was weird, so we still don't know.
But they apparently had some security set up, because a little alarm goes off.
Yeah, they knew exactly. And they were... I have to say, this is a nice thing that I like about it. When you have like an organization or a bad guy or a villain, and they're so easy to defeat or overcome that aren't really that, they don't always make the right smart choices, it kind of makes your good guy less interesting. But I thought these guys are so well organized, they're smart, they have a plan C, D, E, and F of when things go bad. This is what we do, and this is how we handle it. And I mean, like, super dialed in.
Yeah, they were very well prepared for the possibility that they would get raided.
And then what do? All hands on deck. This is where we go.
They pass out pills so everyone can commit suicide, which shows you how dedicated they are.
Right.
They quickly activate the lights, send someone out to a machine gun. They get the plane ready to go.
Again, another thing with planes, right? Like, these guys aren't just highly organized, but have to have a lot of money behind them. Because these are not cheap things that...
So, yeah, they need money. But clearly, they are not as well funded as their opposition. So I like this. They are hillbillies operating out of pickup trucks, mobile homes.
Sure.
They do have one big gun. They do have a plane, but it's a Piper plane. They don't have state-of-the-art advanced equipment.
But then neither does the police.
The police have, in my opinion...
The law enforcements don't always have the highest equipment either. And you actually pointed that out because it took like 7 times practically for them to unlock that gun.
So here's my thing. I think the police are better funded. I think they have better equipment in general. But I think, like all police and security forces, it's not kept up the way it should be. The stuff the hillbillies have, the 7th Cavalry, it's not super advanced stuff. None of it. It's all like 1980s level technology.
But that's actually better because if you think about it, that's easier to be under the radar. If you're buying super high technology type stuff, if you're spending money, if you're buying these weird items, you're probably going to be on a government list somewhere and someone's going to be overlooking your conversations because they're suspecting you to be something. So it's always the one who are just, oh, we're getting fertilizer. Oh, we're getting this because we do run a ranch and that. Like, that's super intelligent, very well thought out, and I give them props for that.
I do too. But while you say they must be well funded, no, they don't need to be well funded. They can do a lot with a little bit of funding.
They are, but okay.
I mean, they're getting funded, but they don't need a lot of funding. They don't need millions and millions of dollars to accomplish what they're doing, at least not one cell.
We don't even know what they're doing yet, so maybe.
Whatever we observe, it's pretty cheaply accomplished.
You know, those head of cattle are not cheap, sir.
So they open up with this machine gun. They turn on the lights, they open up with this machine gun, and those cows, those poor innocent cows, are massacred in mass. And by the way, good job on that.
Don't remember seeing anything in the end credits from the Humane Society saying no animals were harmed.
I'll have to look, but I'm pretty sure those were CGI cows. Or there might have been some practical effects, but you could see them like twitching in the background with gunshot wounds.
I'm sure a lot of it was CGI, but no, I thought it was brilliant. I thought maybe just like you, like, oh, they're going to make them stampede and then that's where they're going to have issues with them. But no, it's brilliant because it's making them have to deal with, I guess, more difficult terrain to get through to even get to the house because now you have all these things and now you have to hide. Now you got to get down and...
Well, in my opinion...
And then the lights are on you and you can't see and you're blind.
In my opinion, it was a mistake for the bad guys, the 7th Cavalry, to have cows that the good guys could hide behind. Well, they probably didn't think about it at the time.
Some of those were, I mean, it's very little to hide behind once they got done with them.
No, like the main character, Night Sister, Sister Night, she was hiding behind a dead cow, and that dead cow got shot like 15 times.
I know, but it ended up like there was practically not much she could hide behind when it got done with, because they really massacred
but imagine if that cow
stuff out of those cows. Let me just tell you.
If those cows hadn't been there would have been no cover. Those guys would have just been mowed down. So they were actually lucky that hamburger helper was on that field.
And by the way, it is Sister Night. You should really know.
It is Sister Night, not Night Sister. Okay, I couldn't remember. So if that herd of cattle hadn't been there, they would have all died. Thank God for the hamburger helper. And so when the guy went to reload, Sister Night, that's what you said her name was?
Yeah, Sister Night.
Sister Night, Angela, she runs up. Very bold scene for her. She takes out the machine gun guy. He runs into the house. She chases him. There's this cool fight scene which you can actually see what's going on.
Yes.
By the way, I have been watching some other things on HBO while we've been waiting for this to download.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fight choreography that seems to be 0.5 seconds of one angle of one fight that's frenetically cut with 200 other cuts of that fight scene to where you cannot understand anything that is occurring. And I appreciate that even though this was a fast-paced fight scene, I could actually follow what was going on.
It was really well done. Yeah. I thought it was a really high-paced, high-adrenaline situation, and I thought they did a really good job with it.
I was very happy with it. But after she defeats the guy, he takes his pill. He even, like, mocks her with it. He's like, look at me, I have the pill in my tongue. And then he...
Well, most people do that when they've decided to kill themselves. I'm guessing cyanide, that's usually what it is, and then it bubbles out, and you're like, yeah, we don't want to touch you.
Well, he He kills himself. Red
Nobody
comes.
Yep, nobody survives. All the bad guys are killed.
Yeah, Red comes. He's like, the coward. He killed himself. And I thought, people say that sometimes. That's pretty scary to kill yourself. So if you can do that, I think it shows a high dedication to your cause. So I don't think he's a coward. He's clearly a terrible person, but I don't think he's a coward. So anyway, the plane is taking off, and that's when we see Night Owl's vehicle. Now, I don't know if it's supposed to be Night Owl's vehicle.
I don't think it is.
It looks exactly like Night Owl's vehicle and has the same capabilities Night Owl's vehicle was shown to have.
Yeah, I just don't feel like it is. They probably mass-produced them, in my opinion.
So, 3 possibilities. Possibility 1, they impounded Night Owl's vehicle and are now using it as a police car or a police vehicle. Possibility 2, they impounded Night Owl's vehicle and liked it so much they made copies of it. Or possibility 3, Night Owl, the original Night Owl, was a policeman.
Yeah, but wasn't he in New York?
Yeah, but maybe the subsequent Night Owl, when he saw that the police had been targeted by terrorist organizations or whatever, maybe he said, I'm turning over this technology to the police so they can defend themselves.
I don't know. I got the feeling that it wasn't the original one. I felt like they produced them or manufacture them, and this is what the police use. But not the best equipment. Still had some issues.
So it had good aspects and bad aspects. It was hidden. It was in a cloud. And I seem to remember in either the movie or the comic, maybe both, Night Owl's vehicle could create like a cloud around itself.
Okay.
So it was in a cloud and it was hidden. I don't think it was a natural cloud, and the reason I don't think it was a natural cloud is this vehicle had trouble attaining altitude. Real clouds are very high up most of the time, and this vehicle couldn't go very high.
Correct.
So it could deploy, in my opinion, a camouflage cloud. It could use thermal imaging to see events on the ground, which was cool. Those are 2 cool things. Things that weren't cool, a little independent civilian like Piper Cub plane was able to outclimb it.
Well, they did say, it's not meant to go this high. You can't do this. It's
right,
not
and then
what
he
it's
forced
meant
it.
To do. Yeah, because, that's the cool, can I just say, Don Johnson move?
Yeah, it's totally a Miami Vice move.
Yeah, just without the neon colored blazers, no socks, white pants rolled up. Though I will say it is kind of nice to see him doing acting jobs still, because I don't think I've seen him anything in quite a long time.
He's still awesome.
He's doing a really good job in the role. I was really impressed with not just his acting, but everyone's acting. I thought they did a good job. But it was interesting. I didn't even know that he was in this.
Well, I knew so little about it because we just found out about it and started downloading it.
Yeah, but
right
even
away.
trying to find, I didn't want to ruin anything, so I didn't really look up a lot of stuff. So I wasn't really sure who was here. But it was nice to see that he is still doing projects and that he's still doing a good job. But
so
it's total heroic hero move, right?
Right.
We're going to go past the limits. Don't worry, we'll be okay.
So
we'll win the day, and he does.
He pushes it past the limits.
Of course, he does.
He fires.
Successful. That's why he's the chief that doesn't have to wear the mask, right?
Yeah. He fires a flamethrower. He takes out the Cub. All right. I'm calling it a Piper Cub. I don't actually know what kind of plane it is. It's just the only kind of small civilian plane I know the name of. So I'm going to call it a Piper Cub. People can comment below on this video and tell me what kind of plane it really was, but I'm still going to call it a Piper Cub.
Yeah, I can't be sure exactly what it was either.
So he flamethrows it, but then debris from its explosion hits the Night Owl craft, and it crashes. Which, by the way, I have trouble reconciling. Okay, it seems like an advanced vehicle. It can't climb higher than this Piper Cub can climb.
Yeah.
It gets hit with a little debris and crashes, but it survives the crash really well, and people come out mostly unhurt.
Well, I think because at the time where it actually crashed, it wasn't super high up in the air, but I do have to say this is another thing that I found interesting, that this particular timeline takes place, I'm guessing, in the present, right?
Well, they're present.
Correct. They're present.
I guess about 30 years after the original Watchmen movie or comic book was supposed to take place.
I think so. And that there's technology, but not super technology, if that makes sense.
I don't think we've seen a cell phone yet. Have we?
Well, they're using pagers.
They're using pagers. Now, that's a good way to send a covert message.
And I feel like that's
But have you seen any cell phones? Do you remember?
I haven't.
So it could be a combination of old and new stuff, like the way some visions of the future are.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting that even though this is supposedly happening in this future, it's not like what you would consider like a high space age technology future where, sure, Dr. Manhattan seems to be on Mars, but it's not like people are riding around in hovercraft and stuff like that. So there's like technology, but it seems to be not the best technology to work. Like
it's
they
the
kind
retro...
of have this spaceship that can go after bad guys, but it's not like a super cool spaceship that's doing warp drives and going faster than light speed and all this other stuff, right?
It's very...
that you think of when you think of technology.
It's very retro-futuristic.
Yes.
Like, this thing is super
like a
cool.
steampunk almost.
Yeah, almost. This thing is super cool and advanced, but this thing is super old-fashioned. And then this thing is super cool, but
it's
this
like
other
super
thing...
cool and advanced, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. It's very much the way that people in the past envision the future. They correctly guess a few things, but then they completely miss the mark on other things. Mm-hmm. I remember on Star Trek, they had pads, like these little electronic pads that the main characters would use in The Next Generation. I think they even had something similar in the original series. But then in The Next Generation, if someone was working on 10 things, they had 10 pads. The idea, I don't think, was widespread yet, that you could have 10 things on one pad and be doing them all at the same time. So it's like we predict the future. There's electronic pads that people will do work on, but we fail to understand how advanced it will be because people have 10 individual pads for 10 individual tasks.
Yeah, and I like that it's not so high technology that the technology is going to fix everything for you, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
It's not like, oh, we can do this. So it was nice to see a little moment of a little bit of levity.
Yeah.
And type thing, because everything really, if you think about it, has some really, I don't want to say dark, but a lot more heavier of subjects and a lot more heavier of ideas and that this particular show brings up. So a nice moment of levity where it's not always so heavy and intense, and that is kind of nice. But it's nice that it's not like, let's just insert a joke here type thing. It felt still more realistic and real. It didn't feel like it was so forced where insert fart joke here just
right. It was very
it
much
felt more real and it felt natural.
It was very much in the context of events. You could have a fun moment in the middle of a horrible scene, because let's face it, that's actually a horrible thing that's going on. You know, they're in a dogfight killing people, they crash. These are horrific events, but you can add a little bit of levity when she's like desperately trying to get in and he climbs out and he helps out the co-pilot, who was, by the way, I noticed her name was Pirate Jenny, and she had like a head covering that had little skull and crossbones on it.
Again, these kind of personas that the more specialty detectives take on. I want to know more about it. Like, why are you the pirate? Why are you this? Why are you that? Like, I really hope that we get some background into the characters more and like how they came to be, because I feel like it's fascinating and kind of that's like an interesting thing. Like, what is it about this type of persona of a pirate that speaks to you and makes you want to embrace it? And that has to say a lot about that character, right?
I would love to get some character origins, even in just a discussion of how they came to be about.
Exactly.
Now, at about this time, I don't know if it was just before or just after the scene. I think it was just after the scene. We cut away to an entirely unrelated location and a seemingly unrelated series of events. We see what I believe to be Ozymandias riding in on his horse on a lovely estate.
Not just any horse.
What kind of horse?
It's a white horse.
Oh, riding in on a white horse.
I feel like that says a lot about how that character feels about himself.
He clearly sees himself as nobility.
Well, and not just that, but he has always seen himself as the hero.
Yes.
The misunderstood hero. he's the one who's done all this stuff for good, right? People just don't give him enough credit. So, of course, he's going to be the white hat. He's going to ride in on the white horse. He's the one that that's the very metaphor and that of a hero. So it's interesting that those little details, I think, aren't a miss. I think that's done specifically on purpose.
None of this is stated, but I'm sure he sees himself as having sacrificed a great deal by faking his death and living out this life of luxury on whatever island or whatever he's on.
Yeah, they don't tell you that at all yet.
But I could totally see him thinking, oh, I've sacrificed so much to save the world for the little people.
And I still don't get any credit. I don't really get the accolades that I should. Like, people should understand. I'm the hero in this story, and I'm going to tell it.
I believe that if he talked to anybody other than servants in this episode, we might get some of that. But anyway, we'll see. He comes in, and we meet two servants. The first servant we meet is a female servant, and I thought she was giving him oral pleasure when we first see her, because he's sitting at a desk and we see her head come up from between his legs, and I thought, oh, wow, he's really got a healthy sex life in his old age, I guess. But it turns out she's rubbing his thighs because he's sore from writing, and it's really nothing sexual happening at all. He is naked, but there's nothing sexual happening. And then we meet the male servant who comes in, and they both call him Master. And it was at this point that I began to believe they might be robots or something.
I feel like they're robots or clones. I feel like they're people that he has made.
They could be clones. They could be robots. Who knows? But later on we get more hints, because they have made him a cake for a celebration. I'm not sure. They say
an anniversary is what they said.
I'm not sure. Anniversary of what?
They don't tell you that, but it does seem to be an anniversary of something.
Yeah. They made it from a honeycomb?
Yes. Bees, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like even though he made these two, I think there are issues with them.
Yeah, because...
And they seem to kind of indicate there are some sort of issues, that they're not exactly operating fully as they should be.
Well, there's one scene where he hands him a horseshoe instead of a knife to cut the cake.
Yeah, and he's like, not now.
Well, he says,
I don't need that now, or the wrong time, or something like that.
Well, first he says, that's a horseshoe, and the guy goes, oh, I'm sorry, would a knife be more appropriate? And he's like, never mind, I have a fork here. So he was clearly frustrated that this guy was handing him a horseshoe, but he didn't want to dwell on it. Then the guy gives him the gift of a watch. And he says he built the watch from plans that Ozymandias had discarded. And by the way, I'm going to continue calling him Ozymandias until I find out differently.
I feel like he's totally Ozymandias.
Okay. So...
there's no doubt about that.
He seems touched about this watch. And then he reveals to them... Yeah, another clock-themed...
Yep, another time reference.
So he tells them he's been writing a play called The Watchmaker's Son, and they're going to perform it.
That sounds exciting, right?
Well, The Watchmaker's Son can only be a reference to Dr. Manhattan, who was a watchmaker's son, and who died while getting his watch in this chamber that
of course, I figured
disintegrated him.
That's what that was going to be about. Like, he's maybe remembering fondly things of his...
Past associates?
Yeah, past life, past things. You get to a certain time in your life and you reminisce on stuff, and that's when people start writing their memoirs and autobiographies and stuff, right? So maybe he's putting on these and writing these little plays of things that he's been a part of or knows about, and trying to keep some of this stuff alive. Because we don't really know. I mean, it seems like it's just him here and these two clone robots or robotic clones, we're not sure yet. There's nobody else around. There's nothing else that he interacts with.
And it makes sense.
So it could just be that this is also for him to pass some time, some entertainment.
Well, it makes sense that if he's pretending to be dead, and it said in the newspaper he'd been declared dead, he can't surround himself with real people because they might talk. So Correct. He can only surround himself with, I guess, people he made, which has got to be a sad, lonely existence. But we quickly cut away from this. And then we see there's dinner with the chief. It's a nice, pleasant dinner with the two families, the chief's family and Angela, Night Sister's family.
Angela's, yeah, her husband and the kids.
and everything's very nice. At one point, we see that the chief takes some cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, that's normally how you have, when you have dinner parties, right? You excuse yourself, you snort some cocaine.
Well, he doesn't do it in front of everyone. But
no, I mean, you excuse yourself. That's the polite way to do as a host.
It gave me the
feeling...
feeling...
Snort the cocaine, come back, have your nose dripping with cocaine, because that makes sense.
It gave me the feeling that he's feeling his age and that he's not as spry as he once was, and that in order to get through the night, he needed to take a little drugs to give him the pep he needed.
He also had gone through a lot. He had gotten shot down in a space machine, right? And looked a little banged up, so that has to hurt. And this is the one thing that I have to say that I like about this particular series, what I've liked about the Watchmen, where clearly these particular people that they're showing you that are masked in their costume are supposed to be the superheroes, right? They're heroes, but are they really heroic type thing, right?
Same as the Watchmen, or the Minutemen, or whatever.
But what I like about it is that they don't have like superpowers in the aspect that I'm, got X-ray vision and I'm super strong and I can do all this stuff. Like, they are normal, average people that have decided to do something about the situation. So when they get into a fight, like, it hurts. They don't just regenerate and are fine 2 minutes later, right? The particular sheriff, and they don't really tell you if he's a sheriff or whatever he's in charge of, right? Like, he is older. He did get busted up. Like, that has to hurt. Same thing with like Angela and everyone else. They don't just all of a sudden, oh, I got shot, so I just give me 5 minutes and I'll heal myself up. Like, they don't have, of course Dr. Manhattan has his special powers, but the majority of them don't have superhuman type abilities. It's just that they've honed an ability that they've had really well, like fighting or something like that, but they're still human. They still bleed, they still hurt, they still get broken bones. So it makes sense that he's going to be hurting after this thing, and having some wine and some cocaine is going to help with some of this, some of my aching bones and cuts and scrapes and bruises that I have going on. He's not a spring chicken, and it's nice that they did actually pick an actor who's older for it too. So yeah, I liked that. It's realistic. It makes sense. And
these are clearly exceptional people, but they're still human beings.
Yeah, what makes them exceptional is, I think, that they're human beings deciding to take on law enforcement or defending people and different things like that. That's what makes them exceptional, not that they're
not super
powered with different things, or I've got this cool suit that protects me from bullets and all this other stuff.
All they have is super legal authority. So
that Panda gave them. Thanks, Panda.
Panda tried not to give it to them.
Well, he had to.
So after this dinner party, they each return to their respective homes.
Mm-hmm.
Angela's having sex with her husband, and he has a nice chat with his wife. He gets a call. The call states that, at least this is what he says it states, because I don't think we actually hear the conversation.
I don't know. Now that you say it, I don't think so either.
But I believe the conversation is as he reported.
Yeah, there's nothing to indicate that it wouldn't be.
The idea is that the police officer has awakened.
Yes.
And so he says he's going to go out and see him. The wife is like, should you drive? By the way, good question. The man's had wine and cocaine. So he's like, don't worry, I'll get one of the guys up front. And by the way, we see there's like 4 guys, I think it was 4 guys, up front guarding him, which is, I think, why he can be the only guy who can show his face, because he's got round-the-clock protection by multiple
Correct, and it makes
individuals.
sense. Like, you're right. You always have to have that kind of public relations person. There has to be someone who is a face. And it makes sense that you're going to want someone who's going to try and portray confidence in what they're doing and who they are. And the best way to do that is to show your face, to say,
Right.
I'm not afraid. I'm going to be the literal face of this department and law enforcement, and you can't scare and intimidate me. And it makes a good tactic. But
Yeah.
of course, he's going to be the one that has, like, 50 million people around his house, perimeter, his cars, everywhere.
Right. But like the unfortunately human drunk cokehead that he is, he does not actually take any of those people to drive him.
Which I thought was a mistake. So that was the one error that I don't know if it was plot-wise, and so we're going to have this happen because plot, which happens a lot, let's be honest.
Well, I'm willing to chalk it up to him being overconfident on account of a cocaine high.
I guess, but I don't know.
Because I've heard that cocaine can make you feel full of yourself.
I mean, maybe I have never done cocaine.
No, it's not on the approved corporate list. But anyway, he leaves without his escort.
Correct.
And there's a device in the road which pops his tires. He gets out, by the way, continuing to make bad decisions. He gets out instead of calling for help or anything.
Why don't you find it a little more suspicious that your car suddenly has a flat tire?
4 flat tires.
Right?
Like you could feel that from inside the cabin.
I'm like, why are you not already in a self-defensive mode, calling stuff into people? I just thought it was so strange, even though you might be drunk, made little sense with the character as it's been established so far. So that was my one thing that I thought was kind of a disservice to this character as he's been written. I felt like that didn't make sense. But again, I feel like, and I'll give it a little bit of latitude for it, plot-wise dictates something happens, so you need it to happen, so this is what you're going to do.
And they did give us the out of knowing that he had been drinking and he was high.
I'll try to. I still don't necessarily buy that as the thing, but I'm willing to overlook it because everything about this episode and everything so far has been so solid and amazing that I'm okay. I'll live with it. I will live with it.
So he goes outside, lights flashed on him, we change scenes. I am already guessing he's been killed.
Yeah, there's nothing about that I thought he's going to survive.
Angela's having sex with her husband. She gets a phone call. It is the voice of the old man in the wheelchair. He's saying, I know who you are. Don't bother bringing a mask. Show up at such and such a location. And he hangs up, and she's freaking out. And according to her history, she's been shot before from people coming to her house. So.
Correct.
So she gives a gun to her husband. She says, if anybody comes here, shoot him. And he's like, okay. And I love that. I love that they understood each other. They understood the situation. There didn't need to be this ridiculous, long-winded series of conversations like, oh, you can't go, I'll lose you, or let me come with you and protect you, or any of that nonsense. They understood. Each one had their role.
Yes.
His role was to stay at home and protect the family with the gun. Her role was to go out and investigate this problem.
He clearly knows that she is still a police officer.
Yeah.
Nobody
and
else seems...
If she had been shot before, who knows, maybe he was there.
Yeah. So they've obviously had something that happened this white night that happened, which we don't really know yet, but just know that a lot of police were targeted, and she happened to be one of them. She just happened to survive. I'm guessing a lot didn't. But that he still knows that she's still part of the police. It's not like a shock to him. So it totally makes sense that he's going to be like, yep, I got it. I totally know the standard operating procedure.
Right.
I've been through this before.
I just like they didn't go through any of those tropes about the spouse who, even though they knew what they were getting into, falls apart at the first sign of trouble and has this big melodramatic display. He was like, nope, got it. Okay, go.
All of them, though, seem to be that. Like all of
very maturely written.
All of the spouses so far that we've been introduced with for the police are all understanding and on board, and they're not like... if you think about it, it's pretty amazing that the person gets that call in the middle of the night that the police chief comes to your door, but she wasn't in hysterics, she didn't faint, she didn't weep, she didn't start becoming hysterical. She sat down at the kitchen table and had a conversation with him and was still, you could tell, upset, but still, all of them seem to be like that, and I give them credit for that they obviously have taken their role as the partner to their loved one very seriously with this.
Yeah, I really like that. So she goes, and we get the big reveal at the end. Here is the old man in the wheelchair. Here is the chief hanging from a rope. And this old man in the wheelchair is carrying that note that we saw at the beginning of the episode.
Watch over the boy.
Yeah, watch over the boy. They briefly pan over it. And you're like, okay, this is the same boy that we saw at the beginning, probably, unless he
Yes.
handed the note to someone.
That would be weird. No, it seems like it's a very...
He's got to be over 100 years old.
Well, yeah, that's why he's in the wheelchair.
So, well, I mean, geez, it's amazing he's alive. But now I'm super intrigued to see what follows. And now it ties back to his words at the bakery. Do you think I could lift 200 pounds? Yeah, sure, old man.
So it turns out maybe he can. We don't know.
So I was impressed and intrigued, and I'm very much looking forward to the next
It was
episode.
amazing.
Out of what should we use to rate this episode?
You like squids, right?
Okay, squids. Out of 5 potential squids, how many squids would you rate this episode?
4.5.
I
Can you
think,
get a half a squid?
yes, I
Okay,
can cut
good.
a squid.
4.5.
I would also give it 4.5 squids. I take away a little bit of squid for the police chief maybe not being as smart at the end as he should have been.
So here's...
And also that horrible bleach line.
So I didn't mind the bleach line as much as you did, but I gave a half a squid away because I found the chief's behavior at the end to be a little too far-fetched. I'm willing to go with it just because the rest of everything else was so well done. The production value was great. The acting's great. The other writing was just spot on, and the attention to detail and everything. So I'm willing to just take that half a squid and be okay, but everything else was solid. It was amazing.
I was very pleased. Not the direction I thought they would go.
No, I was
but very
surprised.
interested to see what direction they go in now.
Yes.
And so we are downloading the next episode, and we'll start animating the next review. Our animation is obviously super sophisticated and requires a lot of time to do.
It does. It'll probably be at least 4 weeks to get it completed.
Well, we'll see. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe and leave a comment in the space below. We are interested in maintaining contact with you backwards 21st century alternate humans.
Yes, we are.
And this is Orbital Opinions signing out.
I see shining stars and planets too, a wormhole rift from me to you, and I think to myself, what a strange and new world. What I knew was once true became something false. The music has changed to a foreign waltz, but I think to myself, what a similar world. Your rainbow has colors, all the same in your sky, and all familiar faces on the folks going by. Other times you differ in those things that you do. Though I love my own world, I love yours too. Sometimes I feel sad as I watch how you grow, relearning the lessons that we already know. And I think to myself, what a tragic old world. Yes, I think to myself, what a hopeful new world.